That stream's running a little faster today.
Yeah, really. Did you get the heron as it flew in?
What are they saying?
They mate while they're falling through the air.
What's that?
They mate while they're falling through the air.
Really?
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to try that.
Look at that redwood out there in the rocks.
Yeah. Oh, he's gonna do something.
The heron?
Yeah, he's gonna do something.
Looking at fish and just kind of gauging maybe distance wise.
Get out of here! Yeah. There's the nose hair right there. Hi, Mom.
It's like when you take a photo, it's gonna start going.
That's a good fit.
What's that?
Yeah, so nice. You made it out of it. Except now you're family.
You're immortalized.
I see we don't, but I don't
Take some of this. Ground line. To the hip slope.
Yeah, totally.
If you can work any conversely going back.
Yeah.
Green's a referend now.
Yeah, well,
So he won't sing some of his. I like that.
know the Al Green story though, guys, don't you? So he's dating this woman. You know what? Is everyone done inside?
Yeah.
Kind of slow.
You guys pull it together.
We're 10 to kick ass.
I don't like to keep
Right away after, you know,
after a
after
session.
laying it down.
After drinking.
We'll find out when we do the layout why it's twisted, but it's basically refining where you put the lap joint as being exactly 50% of the space available on either side, relating to the trench that's put by the hip rafter. Of course, it's at an angle, bigger on one side than the other, so you could divide that by half and that by half, where you end up with a slope, which is actually half of the slope the hip rafter makes on the front, which is half of the regular. Position, the depth that the hip rafter ends up here, that's determined by how steep it slopes and how big it is. And then the cutout for the rest is...
There's extra space. Yeah, but still, for us, it's still nice timber frame. I mean, sure. So these come across.
Manual focus. What's going on here?
On that house, gorgeous. You gotta learn how to make these kind of cuts flat.
Then we have the hip rafter itself. We are dealing in this course with a hip rafter that is going at a 45-degree, regular hip rafter. Yes, it does. This part is ki, or wood. Moku is Chinese reading. This here is the wood that goes. Which means to go.
Is it pronounced Yama or something?
No.
It's in the name Yamamoto, right?
Yeah, but in Yamamoto you'd probably be having that character, which is mountain.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah. In really old layout books, they use a different kanji. That's the wood in the corner. This still appears in dictionaries, but they always use this now.
You say key or key, or do you say either one? Is it something key or key, or?
Yeah, it depends who you talk to. I see both pronunciations. I think it should be sumigi, because usually the consonant hardened with a harder sound, but a lot of people also say sumiki.
And key is the way you just pronounce the isolated character, right?
Yeah, means wood. So corner wood.
Is there wood and tree is the same character?
Yes.
Just check.
Next element. Can you actually get the lights back on, please? Next element, probably the one most important in the roof, is the rafter. There are 11 kinds of rafters in a Japanese roof. Not present in every roof, but they divide them into 11 types. We're just going to worry about the one type, and I'm just going to give you a one-word name. The rafter is called a taruki. Remember the letters. Again, different ways it's written.
Is that comparable to a jack rafter in this case?
No, it's just the word for rafter.
Oh.
The jack rafter is one of the types of rafters.
Mhm.
That's a high skate ladder. I'm going to write that down right now.
So a taruki's like a common rafter.
Yes. Sometimes it's written, particularly in older layout books, these two are combined into one. You get a character that looks like this. Personally, I like the older characters better, but modern books you'll see that. This character means to droop or hang down, be weighted. The wood that droops down the roof. And the next part we're going to look at is the eave, the perimeter eave fascia or eave filler strip. It's not a filler as such, but it ties the ends of the rafters together and serves as a support not only for the roofing above, but possibly for a secondary roof which ties into it. That's called the kaya oi.
So that doesn't have to be one that's curving?
No, it can be straight. This particular one curves, but
Chris, did you start that character, the first character on the kayak,
yeah,
with a horizontal stroke or a vertical?
horizontal.
First stroke is
Yeah,
horizontal.
that's the grass radical. Then again, maybe it's okay to go 1, 2, 3. No, it's 1, 2, 3. Mind you, I've had arguments with people about that.
There's a lot of hooks
Yeah.
What's the English definition?
Well, kaya is straw rest. We call it the perimeter fascia.
We're building the one on top of the refrigerator,
No,
that one,
that one is a different model, but ours is similar to this, except not curved.
but it doesn't, so it will have the kai oi on it?
Yes.
It will have, oh,
Yeah, that one does not. That has a what's it called? A kakshi ita, or hiding board,
which,
hides the ends of the rafters.
so you could like attach a fascia to that or leave it as it is? Or...
Yeah. Now, this is a simplified roof. In reality, the kaioi is but one possibility for filling in the edge of the roof. For dealing with the ends of the rafters in general, here's just to look at a few options. So there's the Hanakakshi board, and this piece would probably usually be called a hirokomai. And there's a little strip. This is to get a cant on the first layer of roofing or shingling. There's a simpler version of it. Here we have the piece fitted on the plumb line cut. Here it's on the 90-degree cut to the rafter. These types of rafter treatments are less common. Usually the rafter tips. No. They use that proportionally in some things, but it's more like the width of the roof, the spacing of the two posts. Say there's a two-post gate. The edge of the roof is usually 1.6 or 0.8 times the post spacing. But other than that, I think I figured out. Well, as you'll see when we discuss the taruki, it's not a square section, so I think I figured out where they got their proportions for that from, but I'm not sure. So. I think they evolved over time as they refined their taste and sense of what they liked, and generally the movement has been from heavier, larger timbers gradually over time to smaller and smaller timbers, part of which is a reflection of materials that are available and cost. So how does one figure out proportioning? Where do you start with so many parts? Do you start with the post? Do you start with the rafter? Do you start with the hip rafter? And there isn't really a simple answer to that. Japanese architecture is built on modules, and the standard module that organizes the rooms in the building are tatami mats. And they're roughly 6 by 3 feet. That is one of the organizing modules on how much post spacing may be related. For example, if a room is 3 mats, 3 times 6 is 18 feet long, you may have spacing on every 6 or every 3 feet. So 6 feet and 3 feet are common modules to space by.
For posts, you mean?
For posts, yeah. However, it's not quite so simple. There is more than one standard size tatami mat, but often post spacing is tied to tatami mat spacing. Because obviously, the tatami mats fill a room to a certain point, and then you've got to have a post to divide at that corner where the walls tie in. So it's a fairly standard one. In older temple architecture, they used some geometric ideas to come up with the column spacing that aren't really all that different than what the Greeks did. And from the column spacing, they take divisions of column spacing to find out all the smaller parts. That's still commonly used in shrine and temple architecture. The old rule used to be space between posts divided by 10. Post size. You have 10 feet between posts, the post to be a foot thick.
That's the present standard?
No, that's the classic old standard, and on older temples you'll see those sort of dimensions of parts.
11.3.
Yes, it is. You'll find if you start spacing out smaller buildings, you end up with really material that's overly chunky. Not so much the posts, but when you get into how the posts interrelate to the keta, start you getting very large keta, and this proportioning rule really doesn't work for smaller buildings very well.
Is the keta going to always be bigger than the post, right?
Yes, it is. The reason for that is you always want a reveal between the post and part above it.
And for strength. It's carrying a roof.
Well, the strength is derived from the height of the piece. The thickness is an aesthetic consideration. So if it's a 6-inch post, you're typically your keta is going to be at least 6 3/8 and 6 or 6.5 inches wide. The height of the keta, there is a rule for that, but in reality, the keta can be almost any depth, and it doesn't upset proportions. You could have a 6-inch keta that's 20 inches. It's like you're going to carry a really heavy load. It doesn't upset the proportion. Making the keta extremely fat, though, does. So anyway, this worked for a while, but as materials got scarcer, and particularly with smaller buildings, it doesn't work so well. It doesn't work so well in house architecture. So there have been a number of other schemes that have come out: division by 12ths, division by 10.5, etc. In modern times, especially with the development of the double roof, post location and structural characteristics have become kind of independent of the roof. You can place posts almost anywhere now, and they've actually settled down to a norm. In residential architecture, it's typically a 105 millimeter post. In higher class work, it could be a 120 millimeter post. And temples and shrines are still following one proportioning system or another. not really much point in getting into all of the differences. Actually, if you have the Engel book, he spends a fair bit of time yakking about ancient proportioning systems.
So it's anywhere from 105 to 120, or it's 105 for.
Exactly. Because these materials are standardized cut pieces that you can get at a lumber yard to build with. Just as we have standardized 2x material. For house building, these are standard sizes. In fact, these were becoming standard sizes 200 years ago.
We have a mill in my hometown that makes that for the Japanese market. Douglas fir squares, 105 millimeter, by whatever meter. So,
Yeah.
oh, yes.
So with the more modern buildings, would they contain a lot more posts?
Yeah, they'll have, well, you still are unlikely to see posts on a spacing narrower than 3 feet. That typically, half a tatami mat on center, 3 foot on center, in these sizes would be normal. If the spacing gets larger than that, then the post size usually will increase. So it's very hard to speak in specifics with proportioning. I just want to give you a sense of some of the proportions. And then we're going to look at how some of these pieces are interrelated.
So you can choose either 105 or 120 depending on load or.
Well, explore how much money they have to spend. Because obviously with hundreds of, 100 posts in a building, maybe it's a large building, that's very different in cost. And typically as a sign of wealth in some buildings, there's usually a central post where it's a lot larger. The daikoku bashira, it's called. And that's often a place to display money, as is the alcove. That's the guest room. That's where you display the best woodwork and the best wood. That's the best room the guests use, and people in the house don't use it.
So that's only for like the flamboyant payment bag for Fukushima?
It's kind of it's a cultural thing in a way. They really like the idea. What makes a house a home is a good roof and a big central post in traditional houses. So you look in Minka particularly, they'll often have a massive post somewhere in the house, sometimes going through the stories up to the roof, other times just on the lower floor. But there'll be one post that's substantially larger than others. That's kind of the bedrock of the house. Okay, I should give you the character for posts since we're talking about posts. That's Hashira. I think this is a bit complicated. Wait till you get into the rules for chamfering posts. They divide the posts into 7, 8, 9, 11 sections. Chamfers are members of those. That's a whole other realm of complication that we're not going to worry about. So now we've got a rough post size.
So is 5 and 10, is that a pretty common pitch?
Sure.
5 and 6? Or not?
It's a 612. Yeah, it's fairly common. It's an average. I just picked it as an average number. If you do the math later for 5 and 10, you'll find some interesting things about it, perhaps. So if we have our base of 10 units going this way, and our base of 10 units going this way, then is it not also true that this distance here is also 10 units? And this distance here is 10 units? So it's forming a right-angled triangle. If we cut through the middle here, in which we have a side 10 and another side of 10, And therefore our hypotenuse is
15.
10 root 2.
15.
That's probably the key thing to get about a hip roof, a standard hip roof, is that the run of the hip triangle is root 2 times longer than the common. If that penny drops for you, it's usually kind of somewhat downhill from there. Downhill not necessarily being a good thing, but
That would slow.
hopefully not an accelerating slope. Okay, and as a similar example,
Keep your hair sound.
start dealing with the parts in a minute, but I just want to draw our hip triangle and common triangle in relation to each other. This is our common run triangle. Give me the technical word for that. The word for slope is the distribution of coal, of how the distribution is, or how big it is. And this is average slope, here at coal by. Sure. We'll draw it over here. Now, I'm doing it too slowly, we do it the wrong way anyway. It's a wine press. That's the plunger, that's the liquid in the bottom of the bucket. Can't remember the etymology of that. The wine radical.
Anything next to it has to do with the question.
I think it's an abbreviation for something else, but it often means to wind and twist or to evolve slowly. So I'd have to go and look up what that was. I can't remember anymore. I think of it as a snake. And I remember it, but it's my own strange little interior world. I want to know what goes on in there. So I assume you still have a table in which you're keeping track of all these things. So again, that's the root of 125, 11.18. 0.0339889.
Could you do that, third character a little larger?
Sure, which character would be with that?
Bye.
This one here?
Bye. Oh. Bye-bye.
I think we're in our post-afternoon
Yeah.
spunk here, it's okay.
Which one is the common triangle?
Get a coal by. Oh, you were, okay. It's okay, I'm feeling a bit that way myself, so. You can see if I take in my model, I take one of my triangles and I break that glue bond and just lay it down. If we just look straight down at this, now here's my rafter triangle. You see how at the foot of it, there's a square measuring the base of this triangle on all four sides? I'm just going to draw that now. You can imagine if I folded this paper here on this line, we have our triangle standing up, and there's our square footprint where the hip is going to travel through. So the whole thing flat, just as I have here.